I am at the former Religious Coalition,
Indeed.
and now Beyond Shelter Frederick,
Sure
with
enough.
Nick, the executive director, and 14 years you've been here.
14 long years, indeed.
Yeah, some days I'm sure feel like 14 years, and then
sure.
I'm sure it passes pretty quickly.
Yep.
What were you doing before you became the executive director?
Sure. I was here, actually started here in 2010, not as the ED, but as a person to come in and to revamp the services. We were very much a grassroots organization prior to that. So they needed somebody to come in, professionalize the services, make us a little more grant competitive, and we did just that. So we came in at an interesting time in 2010. There were a lot of housing resources that were diminishing at the time, from the municipality level. We filled that gap and have really filled that gap since then. So it's been an interesting ride.
And so what job were you doing when you came in to this position?
Director of Client Services and Family Shelter. That morphed into that as well. And then a short stint as the COO and then CEO shortly thereafter.
Okay. What was it about the organization where you said, you know, this is where I'd like to hang my hat for a day or two or 14 years?
Sure. Well, crazy enough, next year I will have been in something related to human services for about 30 years.
Wow.
So I started as a 15-year-old working with city programs that were looking at the inner city children, that were working with some of the public housing units and otherwise. So that's where I really started cutting my teeth.
Gotcha.
Moved up through those ranks there for a while, and then a position came open in the then Frederick Community Action Agency. And I spent about a decade there dealing with on the streets homelessness. So I was the outreach and transportation coordinator at that point, where we would go out and look at do outreach to street level, to riverbeds, to the woods, to the campsites, things like that. So really cut my teeth on a lot of aspects of poverty-related solutions and homelessness at that point. So I stayed until I had to flee for a little while. I wanted to get out of human services for a little bit, and then got my degree in audio engineering of all things, and then came back to.
I might need you.
So
I might need you.
We'll set up a rig
if you ever
here.
need
From there, there was a position that came open here and interested in me coming back to the Frederick area, and been here.
You've changed the brand from Religious Coalition to Beyond Shelter. I mean, it makes sense to me. But what was the reasoning? What was the thought process behind all of that?
Sure. There were three main reasons that we that ultimately convinced the board and staff and otherwise management to make the change. One and most important was inclusivity. There were a lot of folks who have had bad history with religion, or are not religious at all, and seeing the name thought that they would have to engage in some level of mandated activity, which has never been required here. So tragically, we had people not engage us for services who otherwise need it, vital services. So that was the main reason there. The second one was of missional clarity. We oftentimes, as the Religious Coalition, would get confused for the rescue mission, which rhymes and is a stone's throw away from our campus. We've had people showing up here for them, and vice versa. So really to stand out, to make sure that clarity was there. We added some questions into our last strategic plan that asked the questions outright. Do you think we're a faith-based organization? What does that mean to you? And what we heard back were a variety of answers that really cemented the fact that there's a lot of confusion about what we are. So that was the reason number two. And the third one was of a vital, timely need, and that's of funding. There's only so many funds and competitive resources that nonprofits here in Frederick can go for. And we were oftentimes shot down and given no other consideration past seeing a name. So folks that don't fund religious programs, even though we're not technically a religious, see the name and then it was all over with. So funding availability was the third main reason. So clarity, access, and funding competition were all. It was a
all
no-brainer
makes
for
perfect
us.
sense, right? It really does. How are you finding the population here in Frederick County? Is it growing? Are your needs growing? What are you guys seeing over the last few years?
Sure. The last 4 years have been really wild ride for us here. we were the primary pass-through for a lot of the federal rental assistance that came through. And we went from a $1.7 million budget in the beginning of 2020 to suddenly an $8 million organization almost overnight.
Whoa.
Which we had to flex a lot of the infrastructure. We had to create staffing. We had to create policy very, very quickly to be able to respond. From that point on, we'd really been off to the races with some level of, I think it was 8, 11, $5 million budgets in the last 3 years. Really volatile spikes of income that are tough to plan for.
Right.
And moreover, not necessarily to plan how to distro. That was easy. It's what happens when all that money's gone.
Right, yeah.
And we're there
And
now.
how are we going to get it? Yeah.
Exactly. And that's why I continue not to have a
replenish.
hairline today, because we're
Right.
we're really up against it.
Yeah.
We have staff that we had to swell up, and now those funds are not there.
Right.
So what do you do?
Yeah.
And that's where we find ourselves literally right now. A day-to-day fight on how do we keep a vital resource for the community alive, and then how do we keep unfurling the hose to spray the service water.
Right.
That's been the big challenge here.
Yeah.
So every day we make successes and there's setbacks and otherwise, so we just keep on plotting forward. So,
Yeah.
so
I mean, that's got to be tough, because when you get that money and then you staff and you do things accordingly, you add programming.
Yeah.
When you can't replenish,
Yep.
then that means, unfortunately, things need to be cut, and those are difficult situations.
Indeed.
I'm sure decisions that we leave to you.
Yep,
But
yep.
so, how can the Frederick community help you right now?
This is something that we've tried to really wage rental assistance, keeping a rental assistance program going. We've expended about $2.8 million in just the last year, the last gasp of that, those programmatic dollars. And the scary part is that the need hasn't tamped.
Right.
We still see 30 to 40 people per week come through. And these are not the pre-COVID rents that we're dealing with, right? We've seen really unfortunate averages of places that were $1,000 pre-COVID are now $1,500, $1,700 post, with no change other than just the lease number.
Right.
Trying to figure out ways to keep staffing here, to keep those direct service dollars combined to distribute. So really any resources able to be found are widely appreciative. We're trying to find, and it's not that we haven't looked everywhere, right? But with the rebrand, the one opportunity that does kind of refresh are those corporate foundations, right?
Okay.
Those places that have shot us down before. We can go back to those, and it's not lucrative money, but it's definitely enough patchwork to try to keep us fighting along. So that's one thing. Definitely advocacy. Echoing the organization in individual spheres, whether it's civic groups or your Facebook groups or all those other places that there's a lot of communication, getting the organization in people's mouths, right? Understanding that it's not what you thought it was before,
Right.
And that we are very much a on the ground, day-to-day fighting type of organization.
Yeah.
That's one of the huge way, get the word of mouth right is a big way that the public at large can help. And obviously contributions, right?
Sure.
That's a big thing that keeps the doors open and keeps us moving.
Yeah, so I know it's probably, the general populace fundraising and things like that is obviously not the biggest source of your revenue, but do you guys are you doing fundraising on a, one-to-one level sort of thing?
We are a couple different arms there. We are doing major supporter one-on-ones, letting folks know the reality of the day and kind of any changes that are occurring in real time. We also have a few different appeals going out to really help to try to solidify that as well. And we're also finding ourselves in an interesting place of kind of evolution where we have a very loyal donor base, a very, very giving, generous donor base. What we don't necessarily have is a younger donor base. Younger generations' views on religion and otherwise. How do we break into a new demographic
Yes.
where that younger generation is largely contributing to climate control and
Right.
things of that nature?
20-somethings who are very socially conscious, right? And they really do want to help, but you have to kind of meet them where they are right now, right? Most of them are not the $5,000 donors, but they'll give $100 a month, right?
And tell their buddies about it,
right,
and that,
exactly.
that crowdfunding goes a long way.
Exactly, yeah. So I totally get that. If there was one thing you kind of want Frederick to understand about Beyond Shelter, if they walked away with one thing, what would that be?
That's an interesting question. I think that we're here for whatever the need is. We have a responsibility to the people of this community.
Yeah.
Be it the folks who are experiencing homelessness and in our program or vulnerable to it. We're here to help whatever that emergency need is.
Yeah, and so your primary focus is housing.
It's
But obviously it comes with all the other things, right?
Sure.
So do you work in partnership with the other organizations in Frederick as well to help outside that scope?
Absolutely, absolutely. So we are part of the continuum of care here locally that really addresses the homeless needs and HUD guidance and all that. The best practice that HUD then provides for communities, we then echo. Funders are oftentimes happy to fund the water, but not the hose. Right? That's a metaphor I've echoed many times because
Frederick is just a terrible place to be living right now with the cost of housing.
Sure.
Do you look outside Frederick for housing opportunities, or you really do try to keep people within?
So here's a scary little fact. As rental assistance was dwindling here, we were taking up advocacy positions, which we've been on that stump for a while.
Sure.
A lot of a regular destination for folks that have been priced out of Frederick for many years was to go west to Washington County, specifically to Hagerstown. Hagerstown has now seen an exponential shift in their housing costs.
Right.
So they're not only that, but they've hit their funding cliff a while ago. What we find is that if folks can't afford here, they will attempt to go west or have previously gone. If they can't find housing there, where do they go?
Right.
So there's kind of this, highway shuffle, go north, go east, go west to try to find stuff, but then you start losing, your familiarity, your network, your
other
support
services,
100%, your family and the whole, the whole nine. So it's a really unfortunate, perfect storm that kind of bubbles up with the a single lack here then affects downrange.
Of course, yeah. How do you feel like this will correct itself?
Well, it won't correct itself. That's the scary part,
Well,
right?
yeah,
This is
true.
not something that's going to self-resolve. I think it's going to take a number of steps. Base income has not changed, right? Rents have not been controlled, and the amount of people in the area that require affordable housing is not in parallel with the availability of affordable housing.
Yeah.
So you have to attack one or all three of those things before anything gets better. And until you get to that place, you have to be able to have emergency services to keep people stable.
Right,
Otherwise, you run the risk of really jettisoning those who get priced out. And that's a shame for the people who want to live and call Frederick home.
Yeah. Where can people get more information about the organization?
About us, definitely the website, bsfred.org. We definitely lean into the new acronym.
Yeah.
Very
good.
We're aware of it. I made a statement in my rollout speech that you can't out BS us.
Yeah.
It's tongue in cheek. We're definitely lean into the beyond.
You gotta play into it.
Exactly.
You gotta lean in.
Deal with a lot of heavy depressing things.
Sure.
So we keep it light.
Yes.
Right? We try to keep levity wherever possible.
I appreciate your time. I know how busy you are, and I think it's really important for people of Frederick, if they weren't familiar before, to get familiar now, and hopefully we can get you some new, younger people on board to support Beyond Shelter.
Indeed.
I want to thank Nick very much.
Thank you, Danny.